My name is Victoria Sterling. I am 35 years old and I am the CEO and founder of the most ruthless, highly effective crisis public relations firm in Manhattan. I handle massive corporate scandals, catastrophic federal leaks, and billionaire reputation management. I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. to a soft pulsing blue glow in my pristine Tribeca penthouse. The high-end smart speaker on my marble kitchen island. The specific one my 12-year-old niece supposedly mailed me from Switzerland for my birthday, was glowing in the dark. Then the line clicked open. I heard my older brother's voice, incredibly clear in the silence. Then I heard his wife, Chloe. She was speaking in the crisp, arrogant tone of someone who completely believes they have successfully committed the perfect crime. The 25,000 cleared the Shell account yesterday, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. Wire 8,000 to the Hamptons rental, transfer 5,000 to my Birkin installment, and dump the rest in the yacht fund. I thought it was a bizarre technological glitch. I genuinely thought someone else's call had accidentally crossed frequencies. Then my brother laughed, a low, cowardly laugh. Are you absolutely sure Victoria isn't going to check the Swiss school registry? He asked. Chloe scoffed. Your sister? Please, she's too obsessed with her massive crisis PR empire to actually verify anything. She thinks Emma is studying French literature in the Alps. Emma is walking to the local public school in Brooklyn right now, and Victoria is funding our entire luxury lifestyle. She's brilliant at corporate warfare, but she's a total idiot when it comes to family. I sat completely still at my marble kitchen island. I absolutely did not move. I did not move because I wasn't confused and I wasn't terrified. I didn't move because in 10 years of handling the most explosive corporate crises in the world, I had never once been handed a signed, recorded confession to federal wire fraud in my own kitchen at 3 in the morning. But the absolute worst part wasn't the stolen money. The worst part came 3 weeks later at my massive, catered Thanksgiving gala in the Hamptons, when I opened a thick, black leather crisis dossier in front of 40 elite guests and my sister-in-law completely lost her mind. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories. This is exactly where women who build empires in silence find their voice, and sometimes their absolute devastating receipts. If this story hits close to home, hit subscribe and stay for the ending. I desperately need to set the scene for you first. The Tribeca penthouse, the relentless corporate silence, the empire. I built my firm from absolute scratch when I was 25. While most people my age were figuring out their entry-level careers, I was actively burying massive scandals for Fortune 500 CEOs. I do not panic, I do not shout, I manage devastating truths for a living. I find the exact leverage required. I build an ironclad narrative, and I systematically destroy the threat. When you spend a decade controlling the narrative for the most powerful people on Earth, you learn to read absolutely everything that people don't say. A slight hesitation in a board meeting, a microscopic shift in eye contact, the exact moment a guilty executive decides to lie. You learn all of it without a single word being spoken. And you document absolutely everything. If it isn't documented, it never happened. That is the very first rule of crisis management. I keep meticulous records, secure servers, encrypted emails, and paper trails that could withstand a federal subpoena. My firm generates tens of millions of dollars a year in retainer fees alone. My lifestyle is highly curated, aggressively private, and completely secure. I have exactly zero financial anxiety, but I do have one massive blind spot, and her name is Emma. She is my older brother's 12-year-old daughter. She has these incredibly sharp, observant green eyes. The kind that watch a room completely before deciding if it's safe to enter. Emma used to spend every single Saturday at my penthouse when she was younger. I would order absurdly expensive French pastries, and we would sit on the massive white sofas, and she would read books while I reviewed corporate briefings. She was the only quiet, peaceful thing in my relentlessly high-stakes life. Then, about 3 years ago, the visits abruptly stopped. My brother Mark is 42. He is a mid-level regional manager for a paper supply company. He makes a decent, profoundly unremarkable salary. He has always been the kind of man who aggressively avoids conflict, preferring to completely outsource his spine to whoever is standing closest to him. 12 years ago, he married Chloe. Chloe is 38. She works incredibly part-time at a high-end luxury boutique in Soho, not because she needs the minor commission, but because she is absolutely obsessed with proximity to wealth. She is the specific kind of toxic woman who uses designer labels to mask a deeply hollow interior. Chloe has always hated me. She never said it out loud, of course. Toxic women like Chloe never fight you directly. They operate entirely in the shadows, using passive-aggressive compliments, subtle exclusions, and weaponized pity. When my firm hit its first major valuation and I bought the Tribeca penthouse in cash, she didn't congratulate me. She smiled a tight, venomous smile and said, "It's so wonderful that you have your little career, Victoria. It must be so lonely though, not having a real family to come home to." I didn't react. I never react. When you manage global crises, a jealous sister-in-law's petty insult is like a mosquito trying to bite a tank. But Chloe is highly manipulative. When she realized she couldn't break my confidence, she aggressively went after my access to my niece. She started intercepting my calls. She manufactured endless excuses for why Emma couldn't visit. "Emma has advanced ballet. Victoria, you wouldn't understand, you don't have kids. Emma is simply too busy for a weekend visit. Maybe next month." Next month became next quarter. Next quarter became a complete suffocating silence. Chloe slowly, systematically isolated me. She told the extended family that I was too obsessed with my corporate empire to care about them. She spun a toxic narrative that I was a cold, ruthless CEO who had completely abandoned her humble roots. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just let her talk. I have always believed that if someone wants to loudly broadcast a lie about you, the absolute best response is to remain completely silent and watch them eventually hang themselves with their own rope. But I still loved Emma, and Chloe completely knew that 18 months ago, Chloe invited me to a rare, highly curated dinner at their cramped Brooklyn apartment. She poured me a glass of cheap wine, put on her most concerned, loving mother face, and dropped a massive, incredibly well-rehearsed pitch. "Emma has been accepted to l'Institut Rochenoir," she said, sliding a glossy, expensive-looking brochure across the table. "It's an ultra-elite, highly specialized boarding school in the Swiss Alps for profoundly gifted children. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, the academics, the international network. It would guarantee her future." I looked at the glossy brochure: snow-capped mountains, historic stone buildings, students in crisp uniforms. "That's incredible," I said genuinely. Mark looked down at his plate, suddenly extremely fascinated by his steak. Chloe sighed, a perfectly timed, deeply theatrical sigh. "The only problem is the tuition. It's $25,000 a month. Mark and I have completely drained our savings just for the application fees. We're going to have to decline the acceptance. It breaks my absolute heart to deny her this future." She looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. It was a flawless performance, the exact kind of emotional extortion that targets the one vulnerability she knew I still had. She wasn't asking for money. She was weaponizing my niece's entire future and placing the execution entirely on my shoulders. I didn't hesitate, not for a single microscopic second. I am a wealthy woman who has no children of her own. My entire empire exists to secure the future, and Emma was the only future my family had. "I will absolutely cover it," I said, my voice completely flat. "Full tuition, boarding fees, everything. Just send the financial details to my executive assistant." Chloe's face lit up with a terrifying predatory gratitude. She aggressively thanked me, hugged me, and promised she would handle all the complex international enrollment paperwork so I wouldn't have to waste my highly valuable time. I completely believed her. I instructed my bank to set up a massive, recurring wire transfer. $25,000 on the first of every month, routed directly to an account, Chloe designated under the name l'Institut Global Education Fund. I never asked for a direct receipt. My brother's wife was handling the logistics, and my niece was getting a world-class education. That was the only receipt I needed. For 18 agonizing months, the automatic transfers cleared flawlessly. 60 wire transfers, $450,000 of my personal wealth, sent directly into the void. Chloe was aggressively efficient about maintaining the illusion. Every quarter she would email me highly official-looking PDF report cards. Heavy digital watermarks, authentic-looking Swiss crests, complex academic evaluations written entirely in flawless French. The grades were spectacular. Emma was supposedly excelling in advanced literature, mastering alpine skiing, and thriving in the strict, disciplined European environment. I printed every single fake report card. I kept them in a secure file in my office, right next to highly classified corporate briefings. I genuinely thought I was building my niece a massive, beautiful future. I asked several times to visit the campus during my European business trips. Every single time, Chloe had a highly plausible, aggressive excuse ready. The school has a strict lockdown policy during midterms, Victoria. They absolutely don't allow outside visitors. Or, Emma is on a mandatory field expedition in Geneva this weekend. She'd be heartbroken to miss you. She also aggressively managed our communication. She told me l'Institut Rochenoir had a ruthless digital detox policy to ensure peak academic focus. No cell phones, no FaceTime, no social media. The only communication allowed was heavily monitored email, which Chloe insisted on filtering through her own parental account to respect the school's strict privacy protocols. I accepted it. Elite institutions often have absurdly strict rules. I am used to navigating high-level corporate NDAs, so a boarding school with a total media blackout didn't immediately register as a catastrophic red flag. It simply registered as exclusive. That is exactly how brilliant manipulators work. They take your existing worldview and seamlessly weave their massive lies directly into it. Then came December, 3 agonizing weeks before my 35th birthday. A package arrived at my Tribeca penthouse. It wasn't shipped from Switzerland. It had a local New York postmark, which Chloe aggressively explained away in a text message, claiming she had bulk shipped Emma's gifts through a domestic proxy service to avoid massive international customs delays. Inside the box was a high-end, extremely expensive smart speaker. It was sleek, minimalist, and wrapped in delicate tissue paper. Tucked underneath the speaker was a small card, written in careful 12-year-old handwriting. Aunt Victoria, this is a special speaker so we can talk anytime, even across the world. I miss you, love, Emma. I sat on my pristine white sofa and stared at the card for a long time. It was the absolute first tangible physical thing I had received from my niece in a year and a half. It felt incredibly heavy in my hands. I placed the sleek speaker prominently on my marble kitchen island. The following weekend, Mark unexpectedly stopped by my penthouse. He claimed he was in the neighborhood for a mid-level corporate meeting. He saw the speaker on the island and immediately offered to configure it for me. These international connections can be incredibly tricky to set up, Victoria, he said, his voice dripping with faux brotherly concern. Let me sync it to my master Amazon account. I have the specific encrypted permissions from the Swiss school's IT department, so Emma can bypass the firewall and call you directly. I was busy reviewing a catastrophic quarterly earnings report for a client. I barely looked up from my iPad. Fine, Mark, just make sure it works. He spent exactly 20 minutes aggressively tapping on his phone, syncing the speaker to his account, establishing the network parameters. He enabled a highly specific feature called drop-in. He told me it meant Emma could instantly connect the audio feed from her dorm room without me having to answer the call. I didn't fully understand the aggressive technical implications of what he was actually doing. I didn't know that if his phone and my speaker shared the exact same master household account, a live audio channel could be forced open remotely, in both directions, completely without ringing, without permission, and without anyone in the room knowing the line was completely live. The blue ring on the speaker pulsed softly in the dark. It became a quiet, comforting presence in my aggressively silent penthouse. A digital tether to a niece I genuinely thought was thriving thousands of miles away. But Emma never called. I waited for weeks. I left the speaker on maximum volume, nothing. Whenever I texted Chloe to ask why the connection wasn't happening, she immediately replied with a highly detailed, deeply plausible excuse. Final exams are completely brutal this week, Victoria. She's exhausted. The school revoked all digital privileges because someone snuck a phone into the dorm. I accepted the silence. I am a woman who operates in absolute silence for a living. I told myself the investment was still working, even if I couldn't hear it. Then came the Thursday night in mid-January, exactly 3 a.m. I am an incredibly light sleeper. A decade of anticipating 4 a.m. crisis calls from panicking CEOs has permanently rewired my circadian rhythm. I woke up in the pitch dark. The penthouse was completely silent, except for a low, static hum coming from the kitchen. I walked barefoot out of my master suite. The smart speaker on the marble island was completely illuminated, the blue ring spinning aggressively, indicating an active, live connection. I stepped closer, absolutely about to say, "Alexa, stop." I assumed it was a random software update or a digital glitch. Then I heard Chloe's voice. It wasn't coming through a phone line. It was crystal clear, broadcast directly into my kitchen, as if she were standing 3 feet away from me. "The 25,000 cleared the Shell account yesterday," she said. Her voice was sharp, relaxed, entirely devoid of the fake warmth she always used with me. She was speaking to Mark. They were in their master bedroom in Brooklyn, completely unaware that Mark's phone had accidentally triggered the drop-in feature to my speaker when he fumbled it on his nightstand. "Wire 8,000 to the Hamptons rental," Chloe continued, her tone incredibly businesslike. "Transfer 5,000 to my Birkin installment, and dump the rest in the yacht fund. I want the down payment for the summer charter, fully secured by Friday." I froze, my hand stopped inches from the speaker, the blue light pulsed against my skin. I did not breathe, I did not make a single microscopic sound. "Are you absolutely sure Victoria isn't going to check the Swiss school registry?" Mark asked. His voice was low, anxious, the voice of a coward who knows exactly how dangerous the cliff he's standing on actually is. Chloe laughed, a sharp, cruel, deeply arrogant sound. "Your sister. Please, she's too obsessed with her massive crisis PR empire to actually verify anything. She thinks Emma is studying French literature in the Alps. Emma is walking to the local public school in Brooklyn right now, and Victoria is funding our entire luxury lifestyle. She's brilliant at corporate warfare, but she's a total idiot when it comes to family." Mark chuckled nervously. "She really didn't even question the report cards you made." "Of course she didn't," Chloe said smugly. "I used a premium PDF editor. The French crest looks incredibly authentic. She just throws money at the problem and assumes it's handled." God, she is so incredibly arrogant, sitting in that $15 million penthouse, thinking she's the savior of the family, while we literally use her seed money to upgrade our entire life. The yacht charter is going to look absolutely stunning on my Instagram. The silence on the other end of the live audio feed was incredibly heavy. Then Mark spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "What if she aggressively demands to see Emma? What if she actually flies to Switzerland unannounced?" Chloe sighed loudly, profoundly annoyed by his weakness. "She absolutely won't. She's far too busy managing billionaire PR crises to fly across the Atlantic for a random Tuesday visit. But if she aggressively pushes for it, we'll just rent a cheap chalet for a weekend, fly Emma out there, take some photos in the snow and fly back. It's completely manageable. You just have to stop panicking, Mark. The money is completely untraceable. She thinks l'Institut Global Education Fund is a verified corporate entity. She has absolutely no idea it's just my personal LLC." A door closed sharply in the background on their end. Someone muttered about turning off a light. Then, the live connection abruptly terminated. The blue ring on my kitchen island vanished. The penthouse plunged back into total, absolute silence. I did not move for exactly 45 minutes. I know the exact duration because I watched the digital clock on my oven aggressively tick forward. If you have ever trusted someone with your entire heart, and then heard them, when they completely didn't know you were listening, you know exactly why I couldn't stand up. I didn't scream. I didn't violently throw the smart speaker against the marble wall. In crisis PR, the moment you lose control of your emotions is the exact moment you lose the war. I sat on the bar stool and I did the brutal clinical math in my head. $25,000 a month, 18 months, $450,000. Nearly $500,000 of my personal wealth, systematically stolen, through a highly orchestrated, deeply cynical fraud. The money was completely irrelevant to me. I could lose $500,000 in a bad market day, and absolutely not notice. The money wasn't the agonizing part was Emma. Chloe hadn't just stolen my money to fund a luxury yacht charter. She had aggressively weaponized a child to do it. She had completely robbed Emma of the massive future I was trying to build for her, and she was sending a brilliant 12-year-old girl to a local Brooklyn public school while laughing about it in the dark. At exactly 3:45 am, I stood up. I walked calmly to the massive hall closet. I keep everything perfectly organized. I found the original cardboard box the smart speaker had arrived in, wrapped in delicate tissue paper. I pulled the box out and opened it under the bright, unforgiving kitchen pendant lights. I removed the molded plastic. I lifted the warranty manual, tucked entirely underneath the bottom flap, taped securely so it wouldn't shift during transit, was a folded piece of lined notebook paper. The kind they give out in public elementary schools. It was written in bright pink pen, the careful, highly specific handwriting of a child trying very hard to be neat. "Dear Aunt Victoria," the letter began. "Mom says you don't want us anymore. She says you're too busy and important to visit, and that we absolutely shouldn't bother you. But I know that's not true, because you still send me my favorite Swiss chocolates in the mail every single month. Nobody who doesn't want us would send those chocolates. I miss your penthouse. I miss the way it smells like Tom Ford perfume and espresso. I'm not in Switzerland. I'm still in Brooklyn. Please come find me. Love, Emma." I read the letter exactly 3 times. I have sat in sterile corporate boardrooms and watched billionaires cry as their entire empires collapsed. I have coldly managed catastrophic leaks that ruined powerful politicians overnight. I have never, not once in my entire professional life, felt my chest physically crack open the way it did reading that pink ink on lined paper. Chloe hadn't just lied to me. She had looked her own daughter in the eyes and aggressively told her that I didn't want her anymore. She hid the letter in the speaker box under the styrofoam, exactly where Chloe wouldn't think to look. My 12-year-old niece smuggled a desperate SOS to me inside a birthday gift, because she literally had absolutely no other way to reach me. Nobody who doesn't want us would send those chocolates. I carefully folded the lined paper. I placed it perfectly flat on my marble kitchen counter, right next to the smart speaker. I dried my face with the back of my hand. The grief completely vanished, entirely replaced by something else. Cold, absolute, terrifying fury. The specific kind of fury that builds massive corporate empires and utterly dismantles anyone who stands in the way. It was 4:15 a.m. I picked up my encrypted phone. I did not call the police. I did not call my brother to scream at him. I called David. David is the lead forensic investigator for my crisis PR firm. He is 55, formerly of the FBI Financial Crimes Division, and he absolutely never sleeps. "Victoria," David answered on the second ring, his voice completely alert. "Who died?" "Nobody yet," I said, my voice dripping with ice. "I need you at my penthouse in 20 minutes. Bring the aggressive encryption laptop. Bring the massive offshore tracking software. We are doing a full hostile forensic teardown of a shell company." David didn't ask a single question. "I'm in an Uber," he said and hung up. David arrived at exactly 4:35 a.m. I poured him a massive shot of espresso. We sat at the marble island. I placed the pink handwritten letter in front of him. I told him exactly what I had heard on the smart speaker. I gave him the routing number for l'Institut Global Education Fund. "I need every single transaction," I told him, pointing a manicured finger at the screen. "I need the IP addresses. I need the lease agreements. I need to know exactly how much a luxury yacht charter in the Hamptons costs. And I need absolute proof that my stolen seed money paid for it." David cracked his knuckles. "Give me 45 minutes." He didn't even need 45. He is the absolute best in the business for a reason. By 5:15 a.m., he had completely dismantled Chloe's entire fraudulent operation. The l'Institut Global Education Fund was a basic LLC registered in Delaware exactly 19 months ago. The sole managing director was Chloe Sterling. The $450,000 I had wired over 18 months had been aggressively siphoned into 3 highly specific personal accounts. $65,000 had been transferred to a luxury real estate broker for a massive summer rental in the Hamptons. Over $40,000 had gone directly to Hermes, Chanel, and Cartier boutique in Soho. And the yacht? David pulled up the aggressive wire transfer. $50,000, sent just yesterday, as a non-refundable deposit for a 2-week private charter in the Mediterranean, booked under Mark and Chloe's names. It's felony wire fraud, Victoria, David said quietly, turning the laptop screen toward me. Multiple counts. The dollar amount pushes it into aggressive federal territory. Do you want me to draft the FBI referral? I looked at the screen. I saw the massive numbers. I saw the absolute arrogance of a woman who thought she was smarter than the CEO of a global crisis management firm. No, I said smoothly. If we go to the FBI right now, Mark panics. Chloe hires a desperate defense attorney, and they drag this out in court for 3 years. They will aggressively manipulate Emma the entire time, telling her, I'm the evil corporate aunt, trying to put her parents in federal prison. I will absolutely not allow that narrative to take root. David leaned back, crossing his arms. So what's the play, boss? I looked out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. The sun was just starting to aggressively rise over the Manhattan skyline, turning the glass skyscrapers a cold, brilliant gold. The play, I said quietly, is a highly public, completely devastating corporate execution. Chloe loves luxury. She is aggressively obsessed with status and high-end society. We are going to give her exactly what she wants. I told David to compile every single document into a massive, indexed crisis dossier. The wire transfers, the LLC registration, the Hamptons lease agreement, the yacht charter receipts. Everything tabbed, color-coded and backed by undeniable federal proof. I want it perfectly bound and in black leather, I told him. The exact same way we present a hostile takeover packet to a board of directors. He nodded, already typing aggressively. The next step was absolutely the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire professional life. Harder than the forensic teardown, harder than hearing the audio feed. At 7:30 a.m., I ordered my private driver to take me to Brooklyn. I had David track down the exact public school Emma was officially registered at. It was a completely standard, overcrowded public middle school. Brick walls, heavy metal doors, a massive chain-link fence. I parked my black SUV across the street at exactly 3 p.m. I turned off the engine, completely rolled down the tinted window, and aggressively waited. The heavy doors opened at 3:15 p.m. Hundreds of kids poured out onto the cracked concrete. I saw Emma almost immediately. She was taller than I remembered, her hair pulled back in a loose, messy ponytail. She was carrying a massive, incredibly heavy backpack. She looked exhausted. She completely didn't look like a prodigy thriving in a Swiss Alpine academy. She looked exactly like a stressed, isolated kid navigating a crowded Brooklyn public school. She walked slowly toward the curb, a brand new, pristine white Lexus SUV aggressively pulled up. I knew exactly how much that vehicle cost, because David had printed the aggressive lease agreement 2 hours earlier. The monthly payments were coming directly out of the L'Institut Global Education Fund. Chloe was driving. Emma climbed into the back seat without saying a word. The luxury SUV aggressively pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the Brooklyn traffic. I sat in my black car and I cried. I don't cry when billionaires scream at me. I don't cry when federal agents raid my clients' offices. But I cried into a leather steering wheel because my brilliant niece was right there, healthy and real, and she genuinely thought her rich aunt had completely abandoned her. The tears lasted exactly 3 minutes, then the cold fury aggressively returned. The specific kind of absolute, terrifying clarity that makes me the most dangerous woman in a corporate boardroom. I wiped my face, put the SUV in drive and headed back to Manhattan. I had a massive, highly strategic trap to set and it required absolute, flawless precision. Every November I host the Sterling Crisis PR Thanksgiving Gala at my massive, sprawling estate in the Hamptons. It is a highly exclusive, fiercely coveted event. I invite my top billionaire clients, elite federal judges, powerful media executives, and my family. The guest list is heavily vetted, and the catering costs more than most people's annual salary. I sent the aggressive, gold-embossed invitations out the very next week. But this year I made a highly specific, tactical adjustment. I didn't just invite Mark, Chloe, and Emma. I had David aggressively compile a list of Chloe's most affluent, status-obsessed friends. The women from her high-end Soho boutique, the wealthy Brooklyn moms she desperately tried to impress, the people she had aggressively been bragging to about her upcoming Mediterranean yacht charter. I sent all of them highly exclusive VIP invitations to the Hamptons estate. Chloe aggressively RSVP'd within 20 minutes. The opportunity to casually parade her fake wealth in front of her status-obsessed friends at a billionaire-level Hamptons gala was absolute catnip to her toxic ego. She even aggressively texted me to confirm, "Victoria, darling. So incredibly thrilled for the gala. Should we bring Emma? She happens to be on a brief academic holiday from l'Institut Rochenoir." I stared at the text message on my encrypted phone, the absolute staggering audacity of the lie. I typed back smoothly, "Absolutely bring her. I miss her incredibly. I can't wait to hear all about her Swiss adventures." She replied with 3 red heart emojis. It was the absolute last time she would ever send me a heart. The 3 weeks leading up to the massive Thanksgiving gala were an aggressive masterclass in strategic corporate preparation. I did exactly what I do for my most demanding billionaire clients. I meticulously prepared the boardroom. I hired a highly elite private security firm. I had them discreetly manage the guest list at the massive iron gates of the Hamptons estate. I ordered the executive catering team to set up the grand dining room for exactly 40 guests. I placed massive arrangements of white orchids on every single table. I did not want a chaotic, screaming family fight in a cramped living room. I aggressively wanted a formal, highly structured corporate execution in front of an elite audience. The day of the massive gala arrived. It was crisp, incredibly cold, the kind of clear November day where the sky over the Hamptons looks like shattered blue glass. I wore a bespoke, completely tailored charcoal Tom Ford suit. The exact same suit I wear when I walk into federal court to completely dismantle a hostile witness. I wore the vintage Cartier watch I had bought myself when my crisis firm hit $50 million in revenue. I pressed Tom Ford Black Orchid perfume to my wrists. The elite guests began arriving at 4 p.m. Massive black SUVs and luxury sports cars aggressively filled the circular driveway. Chloe's wealthy, status-obsessed friends arrived early, clutching expensive champagne and wearing aggressive designer labels. They loudly admired the massive estate, the curated art, the ocean views. Chloe arrived at 4:30 p.m. with Mark and Emma. Chloe was wearing a brand new, incredibly expensive designer dress and carrying the exact Birkin bag my stolen seed money had aggressively paid for. She walked into the grand foyer exactly like she owned the entire estate. Mark trailed behind her, looking aggressively anxious, adjusting his expensive tie. Emma walked in last. She was wearing a simple, conservative dress. She looked around the massive, crowded room with her sharp green eyes. She saw me standing near the grand staircase. She completely froze. I walked directly through the crowd of billionaires and media executives. I didn't say a single word to Chloe. I didn't acknowledge Mark. I walked aggressively up to my 12-year-old niece, knelt down in my tailored Tom Ford suit right on the marble floor, and hugged her fiercely. She completely stiffened for a microscopic second, then aggressively hugged me back, burying her face in my shoulder. I smelled the cheap strawberry shampoo she used. I held her for exactly 10 seconds. Then I stood up, smoothed my suit, and finally looked at Chloe. She was smiling her toxic practice smile. "Victoria, darling. Your massive estate looks absolutely incredible. The white orchids are so chic." I looked completely through her. "Thank you, Chloe," I said smoothly. "The dining room is open, please. Aggressively, make yourselves comfortable." The first 2 hours of the massive gala were flawless. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated with expensive hors d'oeuvres and vintage champagne. Chloe aggressively worked the massive room. She gravitated directly toward her wealthy Soho friends, loudly bragging about the upcoming summer yacht charter in the Mediterranean, casually dropping the name of her new Hamptons rental, and aggressively parading the stolen Birkin bag. I watched her from the absolute corner of the room, sipping sparkling water. I didn't interrupt her. In crisis PR, you absolutely never interrupt an arrogant target when they are actively destroying their own credibility. You aggressively let them build the massive pedestal as high as possible, so the eventual fall is completely catastrophic. At exactly 7 p. The executive catering manager chimed a small crystal glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served in the grand dining room," he announced smoothly. The 40 elite guests aggressively moved toward the massive ocean-facing room. The long dining table was completely stunning: massive silver candelabras, crystal stemware, and custom linen napkins. I had strategically arranged the seating chart. I placed Chloe exactly at the physical center of the massive table, entirely surrounded by her wealthy Soho friends and several powerful media executives. I placed Mark directly across from her. I placed Emma beside me at the head of the table. As the first course of seared scallops was aggressively served, Chloe loudly dominated the conversation. "Emma's Swiss education has just been absolutely transformative," she bragged to a billionaire real estate developer sitting to her right. "L'Institut Rochenoir is simply unparalleled. The alpine environment, the rigorous French immersion. It's worth every single penny." Emma kept her eyes aggressively focused on her plate. Mark looked incredibly uncomfortable, nervously shredding his linen napkin under the table. I ate my scallops smoothly. I didn't say a single word. At exactly 8:30 p., just before the executive chef brought out the massive dessert course, I stood up. I gently tapped my crystal champagne flute with my silver fork. The delicate, sharp sound aggressively cut through the loud chatter. 40 elite guests completely stopped talking and turned to look at me. The massive dining room went incredibly quiet. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice perfectly modulated, projecting effortlessly across the long table. "Thanksgiving is about aggressive gratitude. It is about acknowledging the incredible investments we make in our future. Tonight, I want to formally acknowledge a massive 18-month investment I have aggressively made in my niece's future." Chloe beamed. She actually genuinely beamed. Her toxic, arrogant smile stretched across her face, completely confident that I was about to loudly validate her fake Swiss narrative in front of her status-obsessed friends. She aggressively reached for her champagne flute. I reached under the head table. I pulled out the massive, thick black leather crisis dossier. I placed it aggressively on the polished mahogany table. The heavy thud echoed in the silent room. Then, I reached back under the table and pulled out the sleek smart speaker. I set it exactly next to the black dossier. Chloe's smile completely froze. The specific, terrifying kind of freeze I have seen on 100 guilty CEOs right before the federal indictment is unsealed. She looked at the speaker, then at the black leather binder, then aggressively up at me. "For the past 18 months, I said, my voice dropping the fake warmth and completely adopting the brutal, clinical tone of a crisis manager, I have wire transferred $25,000 on the first of every month to an account named L'Institut Global Education Fund, completely believing I was aggressively funding Emma's elite education at l'Institut Rochenoir in Switzerland. A total investment of $450,000. A low murmur of aggressive awe rippled through the elite guests. $500,000 is a massive sum, even for billionaires. I opened the thick black dossier. "Tab 1, I announced coldly. "L'Institut Global Education Fund does absolutely not exist in Switzerland. It has absolutely never existed. It is a basic domestic shell LLC, officially registered in Delaware exactly 19 months ago. The sole managing director of this fraudulent shell account is Chloe Sterling." The murmur aggressively stopped. Complete, suffocating silence slammed into the massive dining room. The billionaire real estate developer sitting next to Chloe physically leaned away from her. Chloe's face aggressively drained of color. "Victoria, what are you doing?" Mark stammered from across the table, his voice completely cracking. "This isn't the time, Mark," I said smoothly, not looking at him. "Do not interrupt my corporate presentation." I turned a page in the heavy dossier. "Tab 2, I have a complete forensic breakdown of exactly where my $500,000 actually went." I looked aggressively directly at Chloe. $65,000 wired aggressively to a luxury real estate broker for a massive summer rental in the Hamptons. Over $40,000 transferred aggressively to high-end designer boutiques in Soho. Including, I pointed a manicured finger at the floor next to her chair, "the specific Birkin bag you are aggressively displaying tonight." One of Chloe's wealthy friends gasped loudly. Chloe aggressively gripped the edge of the mahogany table. Her knuckles went completely white. "You're insane," she hissed, her voice trembling violently. "You are completely crazy, Victoria. You're having a massive executive breakdown." Tab 3. I continued flawlessly, completely ignoring her pathetic attempt at gaslighting. $50,000, wired exactly 3 weeks ago as a massive non-refundable deposit for a luxury yacht charter in the Mediterranean. I looked at her wealthy friends. "I believe Chloe has aggressively mentioned the yacht charter to several of you this evening." The wealthy friends stared at Chloe with absolute aggressive horror. In high society, poverty is a minor sin, but aggressively stealing from your own family to fake being rich is a complete, permanent social death sentence. "And Emma?" the billionaire developer asked quietly, completely horrified. "Where is Emma actually going to school?" I looked gently down at my niece. She was aggressively crying, silent tears streaming down her face. "Emma," I said softly, "is officially enrolled at a completely free, overcrowded public middle school in Brooklyn. She has absolutely never set foot in Switzerland. That is a massive lie." Chloe screamed, aggressively standing up. Her heavy chair violently scraped against the polished hardwood floor. "You have absolutely no proof of any of this. You're just a bitter, lonely corporate shark, trying to aggressively destroy my family because you don't have one of your own." I didn't raise my voice. I absolutely never raise my voice. I smoothly pressed a small button on a discreet remote control I was holding in my left hand. I didn't play the audio from the small smart speaker on the table. That would have been entirely too quiet. I had David aggressively route the high-definition digital audio file directly through the estate's massive, multi-million-dollar surround sound system. The audio aggressive boomed from hidden speakers in the ceiling, crystal clear and utterly devastating. "The 25,000 cleared the shell account yesterday. Wire 8,000 to the Hamptons rental, transfer 5,000 to my Birkin installment, and dump the rest in the yacht fund." Chloe physically staggered backward, exactly as if she had been violently struck in the chest. Mark violently covered his face with both hands. The elite guests sat completely paralyzed, aggressively listening to the undeniable proof. The audio continued, filling the massive room with their toxic arrogance. "Are you absolutely sure Victoria isn't going to check the Swiss school registry?" Mark's cowardly voice echoed aggressively off the vaulted ceiling. Then came Chloe's sharp, cruel laugh. "Your sister? Please, she's too obsessed with her massive crisis PR empire to actually verify anything. She thinks Emma is studying French literature in the Alps. Emma is walking to the local public school in Brooklyn right now, and Victoria is funding our entire luxury lifestyle. She's brilliant at corporate warfare, but she's a total idiot when it comes to family." The audio aggressively clicked off. The ensuing silence in the massive dining room was so absolute, it felt aggressively physically heavy. You could hear the crashing ocean waves outside the massive windows. Chloe looked desperately at her wealthy friends. They were aggressively staring at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. She had aggressively invited them here to show off her massive status, and instead, she had invited them to front-row seats at her own complete, permanent social execution. The wealthy Soho friends who had been aggressively fawning over Chloe just 20 minutes earlier were now physically shrinking away from her. The collective, silent judgment in the massive room was absolute. In elite circles, poverty is considered a tragic misfortune, but aggressively stealing from your own family to fraudulently fake wealth is a permanent, incurable disease. No one wants to catch it, no one wants to be associated with it. The billionaire real estate developer sitting to Chloe's right slowly stood up, picked up his crystal champagne flute, and completely walked to the other end of the massive mahogany table, refusing to even look at her. That single, silent movement shattered whatever tiny fraction of arrogance Chloe had left. Mark finally stood up. His legs were visibly shaking so violently, he had to aggressively grip the edge of the heavy table to stay upright. He looked exactly like a man who had completely outsourced his entire spine for a decade and was suddenly, violently realizing he couldn't stand on his own. Victoria, Mark croaked, his voice completely broken, stripped of all its fake confidence. Please, I am so incredibly sorry. I aggressively tried to stop her, but do absolutely not finish that pathetic sentence. Mark, I said, my voice cutting through the massive room, like a sharpened, frozen blade. I completely heard you on the audio feed. You didn't aggressively try to stop anything. You weren't protesting the felony wire fraud. You were just terrified you were going to get caught. You completely robbed your own daughter of a massive future. Just so you wouldn't have to aggressively argue with your toxic wife. That isn't love, that is absolute pathetic cowardice. Mark violently covered his face with his hands. I didn't definitively know how much she was taking, he sobbed weakly. I swear to God, Victoria, I didn't aggressively know. I heard you laugh, Mark, I said smoothly. The absolute finality of that single sentence landed on him like a physical blow. He collapsed back into his heavy dining chair. Chloe finally spoke, but she didn't aggressively apologize. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Toxic manipulators absolutely never apologize when cornered. They immediately, desperately play the victim. She started to aggressively cry, but it wasn't the agonizing, silent crying of someone who is genuinely broken. It was the loud, theatrical, highly performed sobbing of a woman who realizes the jury is aggressively watching her. You don't understand the pressure, she screamed, tears ruining her expensive makeup. You sit in your $15 million penthouse, and you make absolutely everyone around you feel so incredibly small. You made me feel like I was absolutely nothing. We just desperately wanted to give Emma a good life, a beautiful life. And you have so much massive wealth you wouldn't even notice. The sheer staggering audacity of the aggressive gaslighting was genuinely breathtaking. She was actively trying to blame me for her decision to forge a shell company and steal $500,000. I didn't raise my voice. I absolutely never raise my voice. You aggressively didn't steal that massive wealth for Emma's beautiful life. I said, my tone completely clinical. You stole it for a luxury Hamptons rental. You stole it for a $50,000 yacht charter. Emma is attending an overcrowded, underfunded public school, while you aggressively parade around Manhattan with a stolen Birkin bag. You didn't just aggressively steal from me, Chloe, you aggressively weaponized your own child. I reached into the breast pocket of my tailored Tom Ford suit. I pulled out a single folded piece of lined notebook paper. The ink was bright pink, the specific, careful handwriting of a 12-year-old girl. I unfolded it meticulously on the massive mahogany table. I have exactly one more piece of evidence to formally present, I announced to the silent, horrified room. This was aggressively hidden inside the smart speaker box, tucked completely under the packaging where Chloe wouldn't think to aggressively look. I read Emma's letter aloud, every single heartbreaking word echoed in the massive dining room. Dear Aunt Victoria, Mom says you don't want us anymore. She says you're too busy and important to visit, and that we absolutely shouldn't bother you. But I know that's not true, because you still send me my favorite Swiss chocolates in the mail, every single month. Nobody who doesn't want us would send those chocolates. I miss your penthouse. I miss the way it smells like Tom Ford perfume and espresso. I'm not in Switzerland, I'm still in Brooklyn. Please come find me, love, Emma. When I finished reading, a female media executive near the center of the table was openly sobbing. Mark violently sobbed into his hands, the devastating reality of his massive failure finally crushing him completely. Emma looked up at me, her sharp green eyes wide and completely terrified. She had been crying silently, her small shoulders shaking. Is it true, Aunt Victoria? She whispered softly. Did you read my hidden letter? I read it exactly 3 times, Emma, I said softly, my voice completely losing its cold corporate edge. I reached into the breast pocket of my tailored Tom Ford suit. I pulled out a single, beautifully wrapped piece of premium Swiss chocolate. I placed it aggressively and gently on the polished mahogany table directly in front of her. I have aggressively always wanted you. I will absolutely always want you. The massive dining room was completely undone. The billionaire real estate developer looked at Chloe with a terrifying, aggressive contempt. In the span of 30 minutes, Chloe had aggressively gone from the center of massive social envy to a completely radioactive pariah. Chloe frantically looked around the room, desperately searching for a single sympathetic face. She looked aggressively at the wealthy Soho friends she had invited. They completely refused to make eye contact. One of them aggressively picked up her expensive clutch and whispered to her husband that they needed to leave immediately. Chloe aggressively grabbed her stolen Birkin bag. She didn't say a single word of apology. She didn't look at Emma. The toxic narrative she had spent 18 agonizing months meticulously building was completely, permanently dead. But she couldn't leave without one final, desperate, aggressive attempt at retaining power. She aggressively turned to me, her face completely twisted in pure hatred. "You think you're so massively untouchable, Victoria," she hissed, her voice vibrating with aggressive rage. "I will aggressively destroy your reputation. I will tell the press exactly what you did to your own family. I will completely ruin your massive crisis PR empire." I didn't flinch, I absolutely didn't move. I smiled a cold, terrifying smile. "You are completely welcome to aggressively try, Chloe," I said smoothly. "But I highly recommend you aggressively secure a massive criminal defense attorney first. The FBI Financial Crimes Division completely loves federal wire fraud cases." Chloe froze aggressively, her eyes widened in massive terror. "You absolutely didn't," she breathed. "I aggressively did," I confirmed, tapping the thick black leather dossier on the mahogany table. David aggressively handed the exact duplicate of this massive dossier directly to the lead federal investigator at exactly 9 o'clock this morning. "They are aggressively monitoring all your bank accounts. They are completely freezing the Shell LLC as we aggressively speak. Your $50,000 yacht deposit is already securely seized." Chloe violently aggressively turned and ran out of the massive dining room. Her expensive designer heels clicked aggressively and sharply against the hardwood floor. She didn't aggressively look back. She aggressively threw open the massive front doors of the Hamptons estate and disappeared into the cold November night. Her wealthy Soho friends aggressively followed her out, not to comfort her, but to completely escape the massive blast radius of her catastrophic social execution. They aggressively got into their luxury SUVs and violently drove away, completely abandoning her in the driveway. Mark aggressively stayed in his heavy dining chair for exactly 10 more minutes, violently sobbing into his hands. He didn't aggressively try to speak to me again. He completely knew there was absolutely nothing left to fiercely negotiate. He had completely sold his own daughter's massive future for a quiet life with a toxic manipulator, and he had aggressively lost both. I signaled completely to my elite private security team standing by the grand staircase. Two large, aggressively silent men in dark suits walked smoothly into the dining room. They didn't aggressively touch Mark. They simply aggressively stood completely behind his chair until he finally stood up, his shoulders completely slumped. They aggressively escorted him off the sprawling estate without a single word. Emma aggressively watched him leave. I aggressively held her hand under the massive table. I aggressively did not stop them from leaving. I absolutely let them walk entirely out of my life. The rest of the elite guests aggressively stayed. In high society, when a massive corporate execution is aggressively carried out with that level of absolute precision, you don't abruptly leave the gala, you completely stay for dessert. I aggressively turned to the remaining billionaires and media executives. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced smoothly, my voice aggressively returning to the crisp, professional tone of a crisis manager. "The corporate presentation is completely concluded." I aggressively apologized for the minor interruption. "The executive chef has aggressively prepared a massive, dark chocolate fondant for dessert." The room collectively aggressively exhaled. The billionaire real estate developer aggressively raised his crystal champagne flute toward me in a completely silent, deeply respectful toast. The massive dining room slowly aggressively returned to normal. But my life was aggressively, completely different now. 2 weeks later, my elite crisis PR team aggressively executed the final devastating phase of the operation. The FBI aggressively moved in on Chloe's fraudulent shell accounts. She was aggressively indicted by a federal grand jury on multiple massive counts of felony wire fraud and grand larceny. The federal authorities aggressively froze every single asset she had fraudulently acquired. They aggressively repossessed the luxury white Lexus right out of the driveway of the massive Hamptons rental she could no longer aggressively afford. Chloe is currently facing a massive, multi-year federal prison sentence. She aggressively attempted a plea deal, but the thick black dossier I aggressively provided the authorities was so incredibly airtight, there was absolutely nothing left to negotiate. Mark aggressively filed for divorce, desperately trying to aggressively salvage whatever tiny, pathetic fraction of his life remained. I genuinely, completely do not care what happens to either of them. My brother made his cowardly choice, and his toxic wife made her greedy one. They can navigate the brutal consequences of their federal indictments entirely on their own. What I deeply, profoundly care about is Emma. The very next Monday morning, I had my elite estate attorney, Claire, establish a massive ironclad irrevocable education trust. I fully funded it, with $450,000 of my own fresh capital, the exact amount Chloe had stolen from her daughter's future. Claire is the sole absolute trustee of this account. Mark and Chloe have exactly zero access to it. Their names do not appear anywhere on the complex legal documentation. Every single financial disbursement requires Claire's direct signature and a verified, authenticated receipt from a legitimately accredited educational institution. The massive funds can only be used for tuition, books, and verified academic expenses. Emma now lives with me in the Tribeca penthouse full-time. I legally secured primary physical custody during the massive fallout of Chloe's federal arrest. Emma has a massive, beautiful bedroom with panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. She is genuinely, finally thriving. I enrolled her in a truly elite, highly rigorous private academy right here in the city. She doesn't have to pretend she's in the Swiss Alps, and she doesn't have to navigate a crowded Brooklyn public school while her mother buys designer bags. She still absolutely loves reading heavy hardcover books on my pristine white sofas while I review high-stakes corporate briefings. Sometimes she sits at the marble kitchen island and watches me work, her sharp green eyes taking in exactly how an empire is run. She is incredibly smart, fiercely observant, and absolutely, completely safe. She knows exactly how much I want her here. My crisis PR firm is more massively profitable than it has ever been. We just signed 3 more Fortune 500 clients last week. The corporate executives who hire me know exactly what kind of ruthless, strategic architect they are bringing into their boardrooms. They know I completely lack the capacity to panic, and they know my paper trails are flawless. I still wear the Tom Ford Black Orchid perfume every single day. The high-end smart speaker is still sitting on my marble kitchen counter. I completely refuse to throw it away. I know that surprises some people, but that little blue glowing ring showed me the absolute truth when absolutely no one else would. Every Saturday morning now, Emma drops into the kitchen, connects her phone to the speaker, and plays her favorite music while we drink espresso and eat expensive French pastries. The speaker doesn't glow with toxic secrets anymore. It just plays music in a penthouse that is finally at peace. Here is the absolute, devastating truth you profoundly need to understand. The highly toxic person in your life who loudly and constantly claims you are too busy, too obsessed with your career, or too distant to care about your family is absolutely not worried about your work-life balance. They do not genuinely care if you are burning out. They are deeply, profoundly terrified of the massive power you possess. They are terrified of your intellect, your resources, and your ability to see right through their shallow facades. They are desperately using your busy corporate schedule as a convenient, manipulative smokescreen to steal from you, isolate you, and control the narrative in the dark. You absolutely do not have to argue with their pathetic lies the exact moment they tell them. You do not have to scream, cry, or violently defend your reputation to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just have to silently, meticulously document everything. Gather your elite evidence, track the massive wire transfers, find the forged documents, keep the hidden letters, wait for the precise, devastating moment when the structural truth is absolutely, undeniably airtight, and then completely drop the floor out from under them in the most public, inescapable way possible. Let them completely destroy themselves while you sit there and sip your vintage champagne. The quietest woman in the boardroom is always the most dangerous one, because she is the only one who has taken the time to completely read the entire file. If this story mattered to you, or if you have ever had to quietly build a massive trap for someone who underestimated you, hit subscribe to Alpha Mom Stories. Share this with someone who desperately needs to hear it. Leave me a massive comment below. I am Victoria Sterling, and I will absolutely see you in the next boardroom. One last thing before I completely go. The aggressive irony of the smart speaker is incredibly poetic when you genuinely think about it. Chloe aggressively bought it because she completely assumed it would effortlessly pacify me. She thought a small piece of commercial technology would aggressively maintain the elaborate, expensive fiction she had so meticulously built over 18 months. She thought I would blindly talk into the digital void and feel completely satisfied with the absolute crumbs she allowed me. But technology, much like high-stakes corporate evidence, is completely unbiased. It doesn't aggressively care about your luxury Hamptons rental or your stolen designer Birkin bag. It doesn't aggressively care if you are desperately trying to impress your wealthy Soho friends with a fake yacht charter. It only rigidly transmits exactly what is actually there. When the blue ring illuminated my massive silent kitchen at 3 in the morning, it wasn't aggressively trying to destroy my family. It was just doing exactly what it was strictly programmed to do. It aggressively listened. And because I am the CEO of a massive crisis PR firm, I aggressively listened back. Now I fiercely have my empire, I have my brilliant niece, and Chloe has absolutely nothing. See you in the next boardroom.